This lecture today is about breathing and chest function. I've said it a million times. Breathing, heart function, balance should be subconscious. I'm not concerned with breathing. I shouldn't be concerned with breathing. However, if I am, once it becomes a conscious function, your conscious brain is now on life support, basically. You can't run a company, you can't be efficient, you can't be a mother, you can't do whatever you want because your brain's going, am I breathing? And or it can be just as bad if your child, let's say, has issues with breathing. So you're chasing that tail to make sure your child's okay if the asthma or whatever is that bad, or a spouse having chronic lung disease. My son has chronic lung disease. So I'm very sensitive to breathing. Probably though, my biggest thing, I was still in training, and I had this little girl that they'd left from 1 year of age with a dislocated hip. She was now 6, and they just said, well, she'll never walk, so why bother? And I'm like, because it might hurt going into a car seat, lying down, sleeping. I mean, God forbid. Not only that, but when you have the hip out like that, and I know the bone doesn't form, I get that part, but that stretches on your ligament. I mean, everything, that's not supposed to happen. That's not the way we were made. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But as you know, I like to know very little, and she's one of the reasons, Quinna, because of what she did for me in my learning experience. I didn't know she needed to be suctioned. So, and a lot of people take that for granted, but a lot of kids, they can breathe, but they can't clear crap from, so you either have to suction this way, more obvious if there's a trach, you have to get the gook and phlegm and mucus because they can't swallow it down or they can't cough it up for whatever reason, they have to be suctioned. So I noticed when I started to roll her, which again is another problem with kids and people that are max assist, you learn to breathe on your back. Second you go to move just a little bit, whether it be picked up, carried, car seat, it's like I don't know how to breathe anymore. So as I started to rotate her lengthwise on my table, she would gurgle. I'd start hearing this crackling. I just thought, I'd hang out there and do whatever I needed to do until I felt and heard the crackling go away. And you can feel crackle as well as hear it. And I kept doing this as it rotated. And the next day I asked her mom, I said, oh, any changes did you notice? Because again, I'm in training, what the heck did I know? And she's like, well, she can breathe now. I'm like, what do you mean she can breathe? You know, again, and she's like, she scared the crap out of me all night because she's never breathed. It was like a newborn, you know, when the newborns and you're going in to make sure. She really thought that something bad happened because she didn't hear her breathing. She didn't have to suction her. She didn't have to, and all of that. So, and I was like, cool. But at the same time, it really points at something back. Again, you shouldn't hear people breathe. Now, don't get me wrong, if I've just come off a marathon, or from some people that sprinting from the car is a marathon because they're so out of shape, you're going to hear the breathe and the huffing and puffing. I really notice that, like in the way, if you know my office, I only have a curtain that separates my lobby from my table. This allows wheelchair, big families, whatever, teaching classes at an extra room. So, but I'll close the drapes if I'm working on someone and I know, you know, my next customer's coming in or client. If I'm working on that person and I can hear that person sitting there breathing, my lessons plan totally changed. I've got to help that person breathe. More importantly than anything else I do for that person. If you're not breathing well, you're not going to sleep well, which is obvious. You're not going to, you can have a much higher threshold for pain. And you don't know how to do movements. So that's what I'm going to discuss with a lot of that. So like getting in and out of the car, first of all, when you hear grunting, if I grunt, I'm not breathing. So if I go to sit down and it's more like, ugh, now I can analyze that a lot of ways. I just fell, I did whatever, but I still, for some reason, in the transition from standing to sitting, I stopped breathing. So the same thing getting up. If you see people, especially when they have to grab. So if it's more like, you know, or that kind of thing, the breathing is just totally stopped. I know the breathing's going to stop just going for this. If I'm grabbing because I can't breathe and do this, Now, when you do more of a Feldenkrais-based training and so forth, one of the things we learn how to do is actually roll the head to get up and get down. And what it is I should be able to talk and roll my head and pat my belly and do all of that. That means that I'm doing a movement within a movement, and it's okay for my system. Yes, it's a more complex movement, sophisticated movement, I get that, but you're really developing the breathing. So, now, also with the breathing is just the whole function of breathing. Breathing is not muscular based. So, meaning when people go, oh, I just need to breathe. You know, first of all, it's just too much drama. Second of all, you shouldn't have to think to breathe. And people say that much more in stressful situations. Fighting with a spouse, usually if there's a death or something like that, I just need to remember, like if they're crying, I have to remember to breathe. No, you should be able to cry and breathe. And these are life experiences now kicking in. And that's where a lot of people get into, quote, the cellular memories or that kind of thing. What it is that you had certain life experiences that were so stressful or whatever that breathing got interrupted. So what you need to do is work and incorporate the breathing. The breathing is a billow. If I hold my breath too long, that natural billow of the diaphragm wants to come in and out and to breathe. But, you know, yes, I can will breathing, but I take a deep breath, or if I go into high altitude, or if I go into a situation where my body's not used to it. But high altitude is easier to explain to people than, in a sense, stresses or balance. If I have a lousy balance, trust me, my breathing's going too. So, you know, same with heart function. So, you know, they're one and the same. We're still a system. We don't have a breathing compartment and a chest compartment. You know, like, you know, that's why, hence I wore the shirt. You know, we're incorporated systems. So if my hand hurts, trust me, I might stop breathing because I'm so concerned over what's going on here. So when you try to reason with someone that's, say, hurt, they're going to start getting, you know, because the breath goes. The chest is tight because they're in pain, you know, so now I don't breathe as well because my chest is tight. So there's all these things to consider that are important. Now also, some people are taught, like what happens on this table is dead silence. I'm sorry, I can't go 8 hours without talking. I can't go 2 minutes without talking. So, I totally encourage. I have a woman that's doing wonderful changes, but she's going through a divorce. I don't mind hearing about it. I prefer it. If she can actually discuss a situation that's, quote, stressful, but she's doing it in such a relaxed state where she's getting a lesson and I'm working on the arm and she's talking about, why not? I mean, she's just going to be such a different person versus, you know, oh my God, I can't stand him anymore. I mean, it's not even that kind of conversation, but I'm just saying that the difference. And to me, that's an obvious thing to, if it's as hard to, quote, visualize, because I'm a visualized person. Let's say you haven't smoked in 10 years, and you now go to a funeral. Well, all of a sudden you want a cigarette, because the last time you most likely went to a funeral, you were smoking. It's a movement. You know, I'm doing this 300 times a day. So your body's going, okay, my last life experience, I was smoking when I was at a funeral. So I'm at a funeral, so where's my cigarette? So it's the same thing, you know, again with the breathing, you have these situations. So that's why if someone's having a seizure attack or asthma, obviously I consider the medical severity of it, if there is one, but you need to learn to breathe through it instead of everything stopping. You need to work through it, allowing the brain to somehow to see if there's an opportunity to learn how to function around breath. If the breath is contracted by a tight chest cavity, so you'll really see this in a lot where people have had augmentation because they pound the silicone in. Anyone that's had their chest cracked, and this is where we're really going to go into the torque today about, you know, any kind of heart surgery or any of that, where they've had to break a couple of ribs and coming in. because one of the things that happens with the tight chest cavity, it's very similar like wearing a corset. Your breathing you go into panic mode real quick. So people that panic a lot, really you should look at to see, to soften, to get the chest cavity worked on, to see if you can change the movement patterns in the chest so the anxiety doesn't happen. I see that a lot, especially with COPD. And where the panic usually comes in too is they become directionally challenged. Oh my God, did they say right, did they say left, and I can't find your office and whatever. I know I'm going to deal with issues with breathing. People make appointments to me if they're breathy. Hi, Michelle, this is, okay, I already know where I'm going with the lesson. Again, you might not come across this for just eons. I see it all the time, especially with kids with special needs, because they're fine in their condition, and you'll see this all the time, whether I either have videos of it, but you see it in my lessons. Let's say if a child for the first time is going on to all fours, or at least to their belly. I'm just going to move this. So, just a child experiencing, let's say, tummy time, what happens a lot, first of all, the spine's not there, the kids usually, so again, they stop breathing, their faces, they don't know how to, they feel like they're drowning, they don't know how to get their face off the blanket or whatever, the floor, so they tend to even dig their face in more. And again, these are just examples, it's not absolute, but those are things to look for. So usually you'll see me come underneath the chest cavity like this, just to allow to see, which normally happens just this little bit, then the head will at least come to here. You don't see me doing anything else. And the first thing, and because people think that they're here, and this is more typical for other therapies, and again, I'm just saying typical, I'm not saying absolute. If they're suddenly here, this is where someone automatically wants to put them to here. And this is when I'm like, they've never breathed in this position, they've never looked in this position, and so I'm waiting for the eyes usually to kick in first, and this is where I work really closely with the vision. So I'll go this way just a little bit more so you see. So I'll be like this, and I'll just wait again for the breathing to settle enough to free the head, so maybe they can, and that's where the brilliance of Diane will come in sometimes too with the vision. That all of a sudden they'll do, and most kids again, if they're not breathing well, the eye will be here, but all of a sudden when the breath or the belly lets go, just that little bit, all of a sudden I can look to you. And all of a sudden they'll realize, and that's when I'll start going just for the counterbalance through the chest cavity, just for that movement through the chest. And with that, hopefully the next stage you'll start to see is more of an airplane, where they'll start to lift their wings up. Because eventually the hands come this, and this is what brings, the head up. It's actually, the hands out here and bringing up onto the elbows. But again, now I'm in this position, breathing. The breathing, if all of a sudden the baby starts going, well, guess what? You see it here. Also, if the chest cavity is tight, much higher incidence of GERD. Where's the burp gonna go? It's gonna go up your esophagus like a volcano versus, expanding the chest. So, and we all belch, we have to, or burp, but again, you'll see that chest cavity. I never said it, and I probably shouldn't say it, but I won't mention names. Again, I was still in my training, and I worked on a young guy who was 21, and honestly, I've never, ever in my life since touched a chest cavity so tight in my life, and I really thought to myself, because he was marrying someone I knew, and I'm like, I would never, I almost wanted to talk to her saying, don't marry this guy, because I just knew he was going to have health implications like you wouldn't believe, and I'm dying to follow up to see where he's at. And I told him again too, I don't normally say either, I don't scare people, but I told him, I said, if you do not come back to me or do something on your own to help with this situation, I said, within 6 months you're going to have such GERD and whatever. And he's like, I've really been lately suffering really badly from acid reflux and all that. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, this is just the beginning. That's just, it's here no there. You know, unfortunately with today's prices in insurance and healthcare, you really, you want to make sure the person you're marrying not only doesn't have college debt, but has a decent medical history to look forward to. But the next thing I want to go into, which is my baby or whatever, what I like to concentrate on is the torque. And this is where people really don't look at the chest cavity. We think of the chest cavity as just expand, contract. Some people breathe through the chest naturally. Some people go belly breathers. Some people are, you know, you'll see people every once in a while that just have to, you know, and then you can get into the shapes of the chest, the barrel chested, the this, you know. Some I call pigeon chested, they just get that big front cavity. You know, it all depends. But my thing is the torque, to being able to switch side to side, and this is where you'll see the issues with the cracked chest. Anything to do with the chest being broken in any way. Now, it could be just a rib, it could be a major one with the sternum, or ribs through here. Any kind of scar tissue, and it's going to be there. The scar tissue is going to form in a different way than what the body's used to. So you need to, and I'm just going to do this just to sort of show rib cage, you need to get back in there and show the system that it's breathing. Bones are really flexible. You should be able to do all of these things. And this is where I keep going back to, you know, what I know is you know, that's why we like to watch Cure or Cirque du Soleil, because they can really do stuff with their system that you go, you know, they're not human. And or even burly guys went back to, you know, again all the time with Rich Froning and I'm saying his name right. Sorry. But, you know, that he does these chin-ups, which are remarkable, that he has this whole circular thing, or if he's lifting a dead weights, where most people, again, holding their breath, I don't care, CrossFitters, they go like this, and they make every damn face known to man, thinking that somehow their jowl muscles are going to give them strength, which I don't know where they think that's coming from. You know, it's like teaching Lamaze to parents. What, you know? Anyway, and going like this, and Rich will roll it and go up and roll it down. He goes and gets the lift, whereas most people will deadlift. And deadlift, I mean dead. And then they'll hold their breath so much, and then they expect with this tight chest cavity to do all this. And really, all you have to do right now is tighten your chest really much, a good stance, and also bring your chest back, because now you're dealing with that balance issue. And just without any weights, just feel what it's like to bring the hands overhead. It's not easy to do something like this. I don't have the freedom as I would with a free chest cavity versus like this to do all of this. It's actually quite an awkward. You want to do it with 360 pounds, have a nice day. So you really need to look at the way you work with your system. So when you're working on someone, you have to take their lifestyle into consideration. So if just getting in and out of the car is difficult because they're grunting or whatever, or I call doing the 3-point turn. This is another thing too of people having problems with movement, breathing. It's like they're driving along to get out of a car. They have to do and lift and waddle and go like this, and then they settle. And then they have to decide, do I grab something in my hands to get out, or do I get out and then go back to get it, because that's already effort. And then they'll get like this to the car door, and then they're trying to get out that way. You're not going to age well, especially if you're acting like that at a very young age, which happens. But and you can really see where the movement of the chest cavities, what the lesson we're going to cover today, working on each other to do this. So you want to work with the movements of the chest in such a way that are not typical. But just to do something like this, well, if my chest can do this, well, guess what? Now I can do my shoe. I can bring my shoe to me because my chest is what most people do, tight chest, I hold my breath, and now, shoes there. There's no way with that tight chest, and people can look at that too as tight abs. I'm looking at the breathing. Some people hold it tight in here, some people do this. Same thing, if I tighten my abs, even more so that the shoe's down there. But if I have a softer chest, then I can do something like this, then I can do something like this, I can do something like this, I can do something like this. The softer, the more organized my chest is, I can do things with my system that I have options. That's all you're doing with a movement lesson. It's just it's a movement vocabulary, and this. And do I want to get up this way? And do I want to get up this way? Or do I want to, it's just, it is what it is. But if I had a tight chest and I go to do something like this, I'm just going to fall. And my options are limited, or my brain is constantly going to say I can't. And that's another thing. If your breathing isn't organized well, your chances of saying I can't because of breath function is going to go from here to here. Same thing with pain. All of those start to increase. So if you're in pain, depression, or you really, I'm always fighting myself. I don't know why, I just don't have because again, just practicing breathing in the situation. And I don't mean thinking of happy thoughts and putting them in a cloud and do your breathing. Meditation that way is nice, but what I'm talking about is to sit there like this. And this would be just a fun little lesson. See if I can do it on the table. Why can't you think of a bad problem this way, or a problem that stresses you out? I'm just rocking to and fro. I'm just my chest cavity, my breathing. What it is, I'm going into a situation that's very non-habitual. Do you do this all the time? No, you don't sit there and, I'm going to take my shoes off. I'm going to go do this in bed and stuff. But start thinking about, if you're about to test or if you're about to do something that's stressful, can you think about the situation? Even if you need to visualize the outcome of that situation while you're doing this, you're breathing, you're moving, you're happy. You're thinking about a stressful situation through, okay, I'll say it, happy thoughts versus, I'm not sitting there going, oh my gosh. Now, if this is something you can't do, don't say, oh lady, I can't even do this. Now you want me to do this. That was an example. Even if you're like this, okay? Just nice and easy. Boom, boom, boom. If you're like this. If you're like this. It's just the moving of the tush, the moving of the breathing, and all of this, and think of a situation. And you don't have to do that with anybody watching, but you can certainly do it in a car. So, any questions about just the breathing functions? It's pretty easy, but at the same time, nobody gives it any credit.
No.
Because we're all breathing, in a sense. And if we do think about it too, we go into a meditation. There are lots of different ways, variations of breathing. There's tons of Feldenkrais variations of breathing, but that's what it all is. It's just a variation for you to concentrate on that moment as a breath function, but you should not be walking out this door going, okay, chest out, belly in, belly out, and doing, yeah, it's a great lesson, but this is not, quote, normal breathing. You have a normal breathing pattern. You just want to develop it where the breathing pattern can stay with you, with your ebbs and flows of your life situations, and also how you're working on someone. Part of the reason when I'm working on someone and I'm totally supported like this, again, I'm breathing, I'm comfortable. So when I'm working with someone just like that, now if I were like this, and trying to reach here for someone, already I'm compromising my system, so I have to worry about my own before I can attend to somebody else. So it's like crashing in a plane, when the thing's struck down, please make sure, you're breathing and then give the mask to somebody else, but you have to make sure that your system's working at an optimal level, so when you're doing something like this, I'm breathing, they're breathing, everything's fine. Same with the kids, and that's why the toys are there. I don't allow like DS's on my table or that kind of things, because they start getting into these, and it too much constriction. But if they're playing here with the ball, you know, and they're doing this, or I bring a ball in here, you know, this is a great one, working upper quadrant, and that's something else that we're gonna do today, is just, you know, pretend you're like a little kiddo and just working with upper quadrant. Upper quadrant means the eyes, that the eyes actually go above the horizon. But a lot of kids, again, that are special needs don't work that part of the vestibular, and you want to do it where they're safe and sound. So those are the two things I'm gonna cover today, is a twist of the chest and upper quadrant.